morning. Thank you, John. Thanks, Sherry, John, West. I did come from North Carolina. It's a hell of a lot warmer there. Thank you, Lansing, for that nice morning cold wake up. It's awesome to be here. I don't want to sound cliche. You come in, you hear a keynote, and it is awesome to be here. But what I see are a lot of servants. And being around this work, seeing people show up every day, putting different types of uniforms on, different hats from all walks of life with a purpose. And that purpose is to serve other people. It's a different atmosphere. It just feels different in here. And I want to recognize that and just make sure I remind you how awesome you guys are. My journey began, I grew up in Independence, Kentucky. It was a very small town. My mom and dad and my sister Jennifer, we were 15 months apart. I was the captain of the football team, wrestling team. Had a pretty good childhood. I had some trauma there, but you know, what kid didn't growing up in the 80s, 90s? Your dad whipped your butt, right? But Independence had a cap for me, and I had a much larger cap. You know, I was trending this way and wanted to go do something with my life. And the only way I knew to do that was the United States Army. I wanted to put a uniform on and serve my country and do my honor and do my best, and I knew something that was bigger out there for me. So I did. It was the greatest experience I've ever had. I still say that today. I had my struggles, but the U.S. Army taught me more about myself than I could ever have found out in any other situation. So I joined in 1999, became an infantryman, airborne paratrooper, went into the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Whole different new experience for me. I knew what a team was, played football, but when you exchange football for a weapon and you have the responsibility to protect or to take a life, that puts the playing field in a much different capacity. I liked it enough. I re-enlisted, went to Germany. I went to Kosovo for a couple years. Just really enjoyed myself, and it staged us up until 2001. You know, 9/11 happened. The tempo changed. You know, in 1999, 2000, we were gearing up for something, not really sure, but still had this Cold War mindset. When 9/11 happened, things changed. Training changed. We had to prepare for an entire different enemy. So I joined a small team called LRS, Long Range Reconnaissance and Surveillance. Basically a 6-man team that goes deep behind enemy lines, identifies targets undetected, and silences the targets with airstrikes or whatever means necessary. So in 2003, we got the call to invade Iraq. 3 days before the war would start, our team would insert near An-Najaf, which is just south of Baghdad. 6 men, you got to be kind of close to go sit in a hide site or a hole. We dig a hole for 7 days, and you're there. You know everything about your buddy. The amount of training, the amount of time, the amount of fellowship, the amount of family that you create, that bond, is like no other. You hear people talk about it, but it is real. So imagine being 20 years old, 22 years old, and getting ready to go into a foreign country, getting ready to potentially never come back. I was married at the time, young and dumb, and you finished the sentence. But that saved my life. That arrogance, that confidence, that ability to feel invincible, that's what kept us alive. That ability to flip a switch and to be able to take someone's life and forget about it and move on to the next and do it again and do it again and do it again. That removes compassion. It removes empathy for life. It puts a weird value on the human being. It just devalues. It almost becomes a transaction. That's what kept me alive. It was a beautiful thing then, but turning that around, reversing that, is hell. So go back to 2003. We're in Iraq. We walked 12 miles through the middle of the night, 120 pounds on our back, there for 7 days. As soon as we get in the hole, we start seeing enemy come down from the regime loyalists in Baghdad by the hundreds, by the droves, truckloads. So we get to work. We start calling in airstrikes. And airstrike after airstrike after airstrike for 3 solid days, just wiping out enemy. Wiping them out, extinguishing them, removing them, whatever term you want to use. And it was awesome because we felt confident that we were doing the right thing. We were there to fight a war. We were there to do what we were told. This was what we were bred to do. We were there to kill bad guys that were trying to harm our country. And it felt amazing. And then day in and day out, that initiated the war. They pulled us out and deemed us heroes of the battle, and we went right back to work for a year and a half. Every day, we were doing something. Step and repeat, step and repeat. When you're going around everywhere, ready to pull a trigger to remove somebody from this earth, it's pretty hostile, it's pretty intense, it's pretty violent. Only a few people can really do that. It takes a special crew, but it takes a lot of training and a lot of work. It leads us up until December 3rd, 2003. We were just south of Baghdad. The missions had changed a little bit. We occupied Iraq very quickly, and our teams would go out and identify certain smaller threats and then take them out. Well, we were in near the prison, and it kept being attacked. So we went out on a recon mission to identify. We had some intel that there was some high-value targets coming together for a big meeting. So we were going to go confirm that they were meeting, confirm that the right targets were there, and eliminate the enemy. Well, en route, we were in 3 vehicles, and if you remember in 2003, we were rolling around in hodgepodge stuff. We had, things from still the Gulf War. We didn't have the high technology vehicles that we have and the armor and, the evolved training that you have today. So we're rolling around, no doors on the trucks, sandbags, whatever, Billy Bob in the shop could put on. He'd put more metal, we'd create more shrapnel. We just weren't really sure what we were doing at some points. But we're en route, 3 Humvees, 8 of us, no doors, and we get hit. We were ambushed by 35 enemy insurgents. We got hit with 3 RPGs, or rocket-propelled grenades, 3 IEDs, improvised explosive devices. RPG skips off in front of my vehicle, behind my vehicle, and hits the 3rd vehicle. Our truck gets sprayed full of ammunition. And at that time, to win a firefight, the biggest gun has to be in the fight. So I used my body as a shield to protect my gunner, and I was shot in the arm, the chest, and took 11 pieces of shrapnel to my body. A bullet went off my helmet and my gunner's buttocks, and my buddy Bruce lost his right leg and took 183 pieces of shrapnel to his body, just completely shredded apart. We continued to engage the enemy, eventually silencing all 35 men, and we moved out of the kill zone. That's when I realized I'd been wounded. And my buddy Mac, my gunner, he was fine, but had the $1 million wound, as Forrest Gump would say. And my buddy Bruce was in the rear vehicle. He was laying in a pool of his own blood. We went to go put a tourniquet on Bruce, and we were ambushed again by 15 more guys. At that point, we were very angry. We took down the 15 men. The medevac came, and we were extracted. And that's the last I saw of most of my guys. I went from the battlefield, from being the man on the ground, to laying in a hospital bed, transferred from Baghdad to Landstuhl, to Walter Reed, to Walmack at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then 3 days later introduced back to my wife. She's 18, I'm 22 at the time. Does she speak combat? Because that's all I spoke. Just like that, I'm back in society. How do you process that? What do you do with that? How do you turn it off? You don't. It takes time. It takes a lot of work. It takes people that know what they're doing. It takes a community that understands. At that time, we didn't have that. We were still new to all this. So we thought, right? We'd been to war. We went to Vietnam. That was different. Would you agree? We're getting better. But man, it took a lot of heartache and pain to get to where we're at today. So I came back December 17th, I think, back to Fort Bragg, December 17th, 2003. I'm home for Christmas, and December 27th, I get a phone call that my sister had passed from kidney disease. So add another layer of trauma. My team, they come back to Germany. I'm at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They reissue me another set of orders. My team and my unit comes back to Germany, still don't see them. And then you feel like you've let them down. They're still fighting a war. They're still over in the fight. Where do I want to be? I want to be with my brothers, no matter what the cost. You know, these guys were men I was willing to die for, and they're over there fighting without me. It's like at your job, somebody replacing you. It's a terrible feeling. So they got back. I get the word that they'd nominated me for a Silver Star and Purple Heart. The Purple Heart just means I'm an idiot and didn't get out of the way. But the Silver Star meant a lot to me because those guys put me in for that. And if you're in the military, having any honor, it doesn't matter what it is, but when you're nominated by your brethren, that is very special. So it started this whirlwind. The Army identified me as a hero. I didn't know what that meant, but they treated me pretty well. I got to do some amazing things. They made an action figure out of me, a video game character. I toured the country telling that story. And I started to feel like a hero. But underneath, I never dealt with any of that trauma, that significant trauma that I experienced. Nor did I know how to process it. You know, most of us grew up in a time where you just didn't talk about your feelings, especially if you knew my dad. You dealt with it. Suck it up, drive on, and that was also the Army mentality. So you just dealt with it. Well, not dealing with it's not dealing with it. And it will come out. And it did for me. So I started to recognize and notice problems. And how I dealt with them was drinking and taking pills. I didn't know how to feel. I couldn't name it to tame it. I couldn't do any of that. And so life became unmanageable and out of control. I started to cheat on my wife. I had 2 kids. I wasn't really parenting. You know, I went from hero to zero like that because of the poor decisions I was making. And I couldn't get out of my own way. I wanted to stop. I knew I was doing these wrong things. But I felt like I was going crazy. I didn't know what else to do. Oh, this is normal. You're going to feel this way. No kidding. What do I do? What do I do with that? I'm going to do what I know. I'm going to drink. It was the only thing where I felt like I could be me again. That I could just get a little moment of peace inside. That I could quiet the mechanism. I could shut it up. And I would continue to do that. I continued to feel lost, so I wanted to redeploy. I figured this horrible logic that if I went back to Iraq, that's where I lost myself. So maybe if I went back, I'd find myself again. Oh, I'm at a different place. I'm a little better. Yeah, I got a drinking problem. I'll deal with that. If I'm over there, I can't drink. That's great. So I redeployed in 2010. Horrible decision. In 2010, completely different atmosphere. In 2010, we're sustaining our operations. We weren't taking the fight to the enemy. We were sitting around trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do strategically. So we would just get assaulted and take it because we had these big vehicles. Well, they were smart enough to come up with, a $25 mechanism from Radio Shack to blow up our $1 million MRAP. And so I didn't feel at home. I didn't feel like I did in 2003. I didn't feel like I was fighting for the right thing. I thought we were there to sustaining a political obligation. So one night I came into my chew. I had laid out pictures of my kids, of my ex-wife, of my fiance at the time, and I just felt like I was a complete letdown. I had completely destroyed their lives, that I wasn't significant enough, that if I could just take my life for right now, they would be better off. And it would be easier because I did it in country. Like, they wouldn't have to deal with any of that. Oh, he died over there. Dad was going crazy. We get it. It's fine. So I put a rifle in my mouth, and I put the selector switch from safe to semi to safe, repeatedly, over and over. And I was trying to talk myself into pulling the trigger. And my roommate come walking in from the shower, pounding on the door. And that's what stopped me. It was that pause. And he was a captain of police force stateside. And he just gave me a hug in that moment. If it wasn't for Tony stepping in, who knows what would happen. But we all know the end of that story. So Tony saved my life, in a sense, coming in, interjecting, talking some sense into me, and then the follow-up, making sure that I received help afterwards. So for the first time, I went to see a mental health counselor in my life, in combat. A little different than going to see your therapist down the street. And they put me on a little Ambien and gave me some medication, gave me 3 days off, and then right back at it. Pretty good treatment, right? We continued operations. The job still has to get done. And I was in charge, so we just went right back at it. I saw a doctor. I'm fine. Everything's great. Look, I got the paperwork. I checked in. I got some medication. We're good. This is sweet. I'm going back to the States. We get redeployed back to the States, and I got to start my life over. I'm there. I create my own business, become very successful. I'm a consultant for Hooters and Right Arm Entertainment and Kangaroo Express, showing people how to give back to the military. It was quite effective, but I felt lost. I still didn't take care of any of those things. So I started to drink again. It was great being in Iraq. I was sober for a while. But when you have nothing but time and you stew on your trauma, it's going to create more trauma. So I have to figure out what I'm going to do. Well, I continue to drink again. And what do? I self-sabotage. I ruined a great thing. I was getting paid to judge swimsuit pageants across the country. I was getting paid to raise money for veteran nonprofits all across the country, and I screwed it up. Because I was trying to feel whole. I was trying to take and patch something that I couldn't patch. And I definitely couldn't do that when I was drunk. I definitely couldn't do that when I was loaded up on 33 different types of medications. So my life became unmanageable again. I decided to write a goodbye letter to my kids. I had a plan. I thought about it for about 7 or 8 days. I knew my feelings of wanting to kill myself just wouldn't go away. They were always there. To me, it's always been an option. Always. Since I can remember, it's always been an option. So I came up with the plan. I was going to drive a truck into a tree, make it look like I was driving from one point to the other on a job as an accident. It was rainy. It was perfect. I had this tree planned out. And I wrote that goodbye letter and had it in my pocket 6 days prior. And one day I just finally had it. A month or two prior, my fiance had left me because I was unfaithful. I continued to lie, manipulate, cheat, do whatever I had to do to keep myself happy. So I went through with it. I got the truck up to 70 miles an hour and took the truck into the tree and, had a white knuckle on the steering wheel. And when I opened my eyes, not a scratch. The whole front end of the truck was caved in, the whole back end, because I had a trailer on it. It's like an accordion. And I was pissed. I couldn't even kill myself. Police officer showed up. I was intoxicated. I was arrested for a DUI. They found out I tried to kill myself. They put me in a little holding tank with, it looked like a moving blanket you wrap yourself into in the cell. So the next day I reached out to the VA. The VA took me into their detox facility. I was there for 14 days. I'm like, great, I got sober. This is amazing. I've changed my life forever. And 2 days later, I was drinking again. And life spiraled out of control very, very quickly, much faster than the previous. So I had a buddy, again, Tony Meredith, the guy that saved me in Iraq. He came down, we went to a NASCAR race, and I got what we call white girl wasted. And I was out of control. I was not me. And we were leaving, and I decided to urinate on a state trooper's police car while he was standing there. And thank God for Tony. Tony had the conversation, told him exactly what was going through. You know, I got a tongue lashing, and I took it, but he didn't do anything. So word got out to another friend named Melissa Fitzgerald. If you don't know Melissa, she runs, works at Justice for Vets, and she was an actress on The West Wing. I became friends with her through another side project that I'd worked on. And she says, I think I got somebody that can help you. Are you ready? I said, I'll take all the help I can get. So I get this phone call from an angel. His name was West Huddleston. And I don't remember verbatim because I was still a little foggy. But basically he said, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? I said, sir, yes, sir, I am. He said, good, pack your shit. I'll pick you up. You're going to rehab. So he did. He flew down, picked me up, didn't know the guy, tried to hug me. I wanted to punch him. True story. You like that? But I didn't know him. He was a complete stranger who was in a different state, who cared enough to stop what he was doing, to interject my life, to say, I will stand for you when you won't. That changed my life forever. I went on the Cirque Lodge in Sundance, Utah, and spent 47 days there working on myself. Finally, at some point, I was able to look in the mirror and recognize there was a human being behind it. Not a monster, not a loser, not a terrible father, not a terrible human being. I did those things, and I will own them every day for the rest of my lives. And I will feel the emotional pain that I have created for others. But today I can own that. That's what it took. I had to peel back all these layers to understand empathy, respect, dignity, all these things that I learned as a young boy, all these things I learned in the military. But trauma will remove everything you learned if we don't take care of it. The thing I learned from it is expert companionship, or whatever you want to call it. All the people that touched my lives throughout my life. Tony Meredith, West Huddleston, Melissa Fitzgerald, Mark Tichy. If it weren't for those people, I wouldn't be here today. And I say that with confidence. It didn't stop there. West took me to rehab. I got out. I still had pending charges. Came back, I spoke at some event for NADCP, and there was a guy in the crowd that had heard what had happened. He was standing up a veterans treatment court in North Carolina, the first one. And he said, hey, it's in Harnett County, which is like UP to you guys, way out there. I was in Charlotte, and it was probably 2 hours and 45-minute drive each way. But he got me into this veterans treatment court. I had no idea, no concept other than, what Justice for Vets was doing. I never thought I'd be a part of that. So he invited me, I did, and it was a little over a year I was in that process of just really owning my stuff. Veterans Treatment Court taught me how to be a man. Right? It taught me that ownership. Even still, I'd been doing that work of getting myself clean and sober. It was owning what I'd done. It was owning what I can be. I'd gotten a lot of great, easy, good treatment and kind of like, oh, you did this, that's okay, we'll let that pass go, collect your $200. I was let off, not in Veterans Treatment Court. That judge held me to the same standard as he did everybody else, and it whipped my butt into shape. It's exactly what I needed at the time to project me to where I am now. So I asked you guys, if not you, then who? If you don't do it, who's going to? If you just look to the other person and say, well, I guess it's your turn, I would have missed my chance. If it wasn't for West, then who would have done that? The compassion, empathy, the love for your brother or sister is what we have to remind ourselves. In this room, we are reminded by that. I love and honor every one of you and are so appreciative that you guys stand up for what you say. Your actions speak louder than words. $20 helping somebody get a bus pass, keeping them sober, giving them the opportunity to get their lives back. That's all every one of us need. And we're not far away. Every one of us are one life accident or one life problem from being where I was or being where they are. So every one of you, thank you. Thank you for your commitment, your hard work, dedication to the human being, and thank you for allowing me to be here today.